Hello there, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. This is Dicebag, and what's this? Am I opening a box? No, this box is already opened. Okay, what I'm gonna do here is I feel like some of my criticisms may need some context, so I'm going to go back in time a bit to this Darksteel era from Marauden block, and we're gonna look at the way things used to be. Because I know a lot of people I see online in discussions and all that are saying things like, oh yeah, I'm a big fan of Magic, I love Magic, I've been playing Magic for a long time. And you're like, wow, when did you start playing? And they say, oh, you know, Innistrad block. And I'm like, oh, really? So you remember Liliana and Snapcaster? And they're like, oh no, Shadows over Innistrad. And it's just like, okay, so you're practically a total newbie in the entire history of the game. So this is for those who don't remember the days of creative design. So the thing is, I've pulled out the rares and any valuable uncommons from these, but other than that, they're pretty much still in pack order. So you won't see any ether vials or anything like that, but we're gonna go look at the commons and uncommons and just see how much more interesting even the low-level common cards were back in the day. Because we start off here, we got ourselves a Tangle Golem. And it's a pretty generic French vanilla, but the thing is, it's got a new mechanic for the set, or at least for the block. And yeah, 7 mana for a 5/4 is not very good, but if you're playing it in a mono green deck, then all of a sudden the affinity for forest means that it costs, let's see, 4 mana. Now it's a 5/4 for 4. That's pretty good. And Chittering Rats, their next one. Let's see, when it comes into play, target opponent puts a card from top of his or her hand on top of his or from his hand on top of his library. And this is a 2/2 for 3. It's a card that creates card advantage for you at the cost of only, 1 extra. It's a pretty efficient little guy, even at common. A Ritual of Restoration. Now look at this. It's a return an artifact from your graveyard to your hand. But it's only 1 mana. Now if you compare that to like the Merfolk guy from M19, that was a 5 mana 2/2 that returns an instant or sorcery, it's basically tacking on like 3 extra mana for a 1 mana effect. They always overcost this instant and sorcery retrieval for some reason. And Razor Golem, another one of these affinity guys. 6 mana for a 3/4 affinity for planes. Again, you can cast this guy for 3, and he's a 3/4 with vigilance. This is a common, guys. He's pretty efficient. Quicksilver Behemoth, affinity for artifacts. That one was often deemed too powerful. I think it's because they slapped it on colorless cards and just made it so you could cast too many free spells. But guys like this are perfectly fine. He has a little drawback that you have to return him to your hand, but if you're playing a deck with affinity for artifacts, he's gonna be pretty cheap to replay. Telgelad Wolf, it's a 2/2 for 3, but whenever it becomes blocked by an artifact creature, it gets +3/+3. So thing with this is that it's very useful in the Marauden environment. So like limited and all that he'd be a really good card to have against artifact decks, which are most. But outside of that, he's not particularly useful. but he is interesting. And that's really the thing. Not all the cards need to be great, but they should at least have some interesting things that they do. And that guy, he fits that bill. Mirror Landshaper, there's another one that's not super powerful, but interesting. He's a 3-mana 1/1, but you can tap him to make it a land, an artifact, until end of turn. So he helps out with affinity, but he can also do this to your opponent's lands, letting you hit them with artifact removal. So he's a little combo player there. Drooling Ogre. Again, this is a 2-mana 3/3, but he has an artifact. He has an ability that says whenever you play an artifact spell, that player, or when a player plays an artifact, that player gains control of him. So he's actually kind of the opposite of the wolf. He's very, he's a questionable guy to use in the Maraudon environment, but outside of that, where people aren't playing artifacts left and right, he's super efficient. And these are commons, remember. We haven't even hit uncommons yet. These are all like relatively creative and even pushed. Arcane Spyglass. It's probably not very good, but again, it's interesting. 4 mana for the artifact, and 2 tap and sacrifice a land to draw a card and put a charge counter on it. And once you have 3 charge counters, you can draw another card. Like, clearly this is another kind of casual limited card where you're going to have more lands than you actually would need. And you can turn those into extra draws. Nourish. Not much to say about that. 2 mana, gain 6 life, instant. Arcbound Crusher. Let's see. He's a 4 mana 1/1 because of modular, but he's got trample, and whenever another artifact comes into play, he gets another +1/+1 counter. So he's not really powerful out of the gate, but again, he does something interesting, and he does something you can actually build around. That's something about the modular cards that I really liked, is that they were a simple mechanic, but they were fun to play with, and you could build a whole deck around them. Stand Together, and this is another thing, it works with modular. 5 mana, put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature and 2 on another creature. So that's kind of a roundabout way for green to be able to interact with artifacts, and I think that's really cool. Vidalcan Engineer, 2 mana 1/1, but you can tap for 2 mana of any one color, as long as you use it to pay for artifacts. He's some good ramp if you need that. Now, Reap and Sow. Here we have another new mechanic for the set, Entwine. So it has 4 mana, choose 1, destroy target land, or search your library for a land card, and it either destroys a land or it ramps you. So for 4 mana, you get either of those, which seems perfectly fine for 4 mana. Usually land destruction is at least 4 in the modern day, but then you can pay 2 more for both. Now, Spire Golem, another one of these affinity for lands. This guy's got flying. He's probably going to be at best a 2/4 flyer for 3. That's not bad. I mean, all these golems are actually pretty good as far as the cost of power and toughness if you're playing them in a monocolored deck. And that's kind of a thing that has fallen by the wayside, really, is relying on cards to be in certain decks to be at their highest potential. Unforge, again, destroy target equipment. If it was attached to a creature, it deals 2 damage. It's some removal, but conditional removal. That's really, it can be useful in the environment it's in. Vex, not a very good card, really. It's a counterspell. It's a hard counterspell, but your opponent gets to draw. Urgolem's Eye, 4 mana, add 2 to your mana pool. Not much there, but, you know, it works. It does what it's supposed to. Echoing Courage, this is a whole cycle of cards they had. 2 mana instant, target creature and all other creatures with the same name as that creature get +2/+2 until end of turn. They had all these echoing cards that always targeted something and then every other thing with the same name. So they were real effective with tokens. Let's see, Mere Moon Vessel, 1/1 for 1. When it's put into a graveyard from play, add 1 to your mana pool. Back in the day we had mana burn, so that was kind of actually a drawback. Not so much now. Anyways, I don't have a whole lot of time to keep going through these, but here we have Spin Crusher. 2 mana, 0/2. Whenever it blocks, it gets a counter. And you can remove a counter to make them unblockable. Stand Together, we've seen that. Juggernaut's very good. Not very good. Darksteel, another affinity for swamps. Look at him. Again, he's probably like a 3 mana, 3/2 Essence Drain. This one's a little weak. This one's 3 damage to target creature or player, and you gain 3 life. Yeah, not so much. Anyways, I'm running out of time on my phone, so that's about all I can show right now. Alright, I'm back. Let's get back into this. No messing around this time. We've seen most of these things before. Neurok Prodigy, here's the whole thing. Back in the day, I believe this was during the time where damage was still added to the stack. So, something you could do with this guy, since he lets you discard an artifact to return him to his hand, you could actually block with him, kill the attacking creature he blocks, then activate his ability and return him to your hand. So that's this little trick they kind of got rid of because it was kind of unintuitive, but that made him useful. So Reap and Sow, we've seen that. Crazed Goblin, not much interesting there, just a 1/1 that must attack. Vex, not great. Urgolem, we've seen it. Echoing Courage, same thing. Nemesis Mask. Now, Mirrodin was the first block to introduce equipment, so they have this 3 mana, equip for 3, all creatures able to block equip creature to do so. That's one's hard to really judge, I guess. Infested Roothold, protection from artifacts, relevant in this environment. And whenever an opponent plays an artifact spell, you get a 1/1 insect. So 5 mana for that on a 0/3. He's a little expensive, but in the environment, that's probably pretty good. Actually, it seems like the uncommons are typically weaker than the commons during these days, but they were a little more complex. Darksteel Brute, let's see, 2 mana, indestructible, and for 3 becomes a 2/2 artifact creature until end of turn. Yeah, this is a little beef I have with the way they did vehicles and stuff, is that they already kind of have a method for turning things into creatures, but with vehicles, instead of doing that, they basically decided to reinvent the wheel, but only for vehicles. So instead of having vehicles that say, hey, crew this for this much and it becomes a this until end of turn, they completely change up the card frame, they add stuff to it, they change the rulings so that, hey, it already has the power and toughness, but it's only a creature and has power and toughness when you crew it. But it's just like, just do it the old way, or if you're so inclined, change every artifact or everything else that can turn into a creature into the new frame where it has its own power and toughness. Don't do it. Don't have both at the same time. Dross Golem, we know that. Telgelite Outrider, a little overcosted, but he's got protection from artifacts. That can be very relevant. And here's another Echoing card. Echoing Decay, target creature and all other creatures with the same name get -2/-2. That's 2 mana instant. That can wipe out a token deck. That's practically a board wipe if you're playing against tokens. Bound Bruiser. Now again, modular, one of my favorite mechanics. And he's a little overcosted at 5 for a 3/3, but you know, he has the modular thing. Those 3 counters usually don't go away once he dies. They get to stay around. So, you know, it's a little boring, it's a little weak, but it's modular. It's a new thing. They're allowed some room on that. Crackland Stoker, 3 mana 2/2. You can sacrifice an artifact to add red to your mana pool. That's some nice ramp there. He basically turns your artifacts into dark rituals. And again, interacts with artifacts as a theme. It's something you can build your deck around. Echoing Truth, another thing that's a real token hoser. It returns a non-land permanent and all other permanents with the name to their owner's hands, so when tokens leave the battlefield, they don't go to a hand, they cease to exist. That's pretty much a one-sided board wipe for someone who's been pulling a lot of tokens. Scavenging Scarab. Ooh, this guy's just weak. This is probably the first one where I've said, man, this guy shouldn't exist. 4 mana for a 3/3 that can't block. Yeah, black had weak creatures back then. I don't think they even were allowed to have bears by the design team. Metal Fatigue, 3 mana instant, tap all artifacts. Boring but relevant. Urgolem's Eye, we've seen it. Inflame, deals 2 damage to each creature dealt damage this turn. Kind of a niche card, but it does a thing that's kind of unique, so... Whisper Silk Cloak, let's see, 3 mana, equipped for 2, becomes unblockable and can't be the target of spells or abilities. See, now compare that to the other thing I was talking about, Nemesis Mask. That guy, again, the lower rarity seems like it's a lot better. Costs the same to play, costs less to equip, and it gives them Shroud and Unblockable. That seems really good. Hoverguard Observer. He's a 3/3 for 4 flying, but he can only block only creatures with flying. He's a little underpowered, I guess. But back in the day, things like this, creatures were usually not pushed very much. So that, in context, it was pretty good, I'm sure. Ritual Restoration, Razor Golem, we've seen these before. Let's see, there's Terran Ghost, 2 mana 1/1 flying, lets you regenerate an artifact. Hallow, let's see. 1 mana, prevent all damage a spell would deal this turn. You gain life equal to the damage. Little underpowered, seems like. Or situational, really. You're not likely to run into a situation where that's going to really turn things around. You're pretty much stuck to using it against red decks. Maryland Shaper, Drooling Ogre Vex, we've seen these before. Chimeric Egg, there's another one. Again, it's an uncommon that does kind of interesting things. Whenever opponent plays a non-artifact spell, put a charge counter, and remove 3 charge counters to make it a 6/6. And like, it's a 3 mana. Seems decent to me. Probably not useful all the time, but Screams from Within. Enchanted creature gets -1/-1. When it's put into a graveyard, return it from your graveyard to play. Well, we turn Screams from Within. So, little repeated 1/1 removal or just shrinking. Bound Slith. Now here's another thing. The Sliths were, I think the other ones were in the first Maraudin set. So all these things have the ability that whenever they deal damage to a player, they get an extra counter. This guy's got modular in addition to that. So that's a nice little bonus. And by the way, slap a Whisper Soul, geez. Slap a Whisper Soul Cloak on that guy, and you know, you'll be racking up counters fast for your modular deck. Crack Clan Stoker, we've seen him. Echoing Decay, we've seen most of this stuff by now. Let's see, Viridian Acolyte. He's a little color fixer. Burden of Greed. Little Artifact Hate in black. 4 mana, target player loses 1 life for each tapped artifact he or she controls. Probably a little overcosted there, but it is what it is. Not every card can be great. Drill Skimmer. 4 mana, 2/1. Can't be the target of spells or abilities as long as you control another artifact. Now again, it's not a great card, but it's an interesting card. It's, you know, I guess the ability is worth 1 mana, they are thinking, and normally a colorless card for 3 mana, 2/1 flying seems about right, at least for back in the day. Echoing Calm. Here's destroy target enchantment and all of the enchantments with the same name, but yeah, that's probably not gonna be very useful. White gets the shaft on the echoing cards, apparently. Scrounge, let's see. Target opponent chooses an artifact card in his or her graveyard. Put that card into play under your control. Oh, that's interesting. I don't even remember that card, but it's kind of cool. Now we get more Arcbound. 6 mana, let's see, modular 3 with Fear. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you can move a counter from target creature onto it. Not super good, but, you know, he does an interesting thing at least. Test of Faith. Yeah, it's a damage prevention spell, plus it adds counters, so yeah, more interaction with modular and all that. Echoing Ruin. Now that one probably actually is good, since it destroys an artifact and all other artifacts. We know the truth. Draw Golem. Yeah, I think we've seen these. Whoops. There we go again. So what else have we got? Let's just kind of shuffle through this and see if anything interesting pops out. Let's see. Barbed Lightning. There's another Entwine card. So it's a 3 mana lightning bolt, but you can pay 5 to get a double lightning bolt, basically. Deal 3 damage to a creature and a player. It's probably a little overcosted to be good, but you know, the option is there and it's worth something on its own. Tangle Spider, he's little, kind of weak. Nobody's gonna pay a 6 mana for a 3/4, even if it can block flying and be played in it as an instant. That's just not worth it. Darksteel Gargoyle, yeah, I think they were really overvaluing Indestructible at this point. Maybe it's because they didn't have good exile removal and stuff like that. Yeah, Darksteel Pendant. Look at that. 2 mana for 1 and a tap. You can look at the top card. You can basically scry for 1 every turn. Neurotic Transmuter. Target creature becomes an artifact. Target artifact becomes blue and not an artifact. That's Skull Clamp. I figured I would have taken this one out. This one got things into trouble. Since it turned all your creatures into draw spells when they died. Oh, there's another one with a drawback, but a efficient body. A 5/5 for 4. When it comes into play, sacrifice it unless you sacrifice an artifact, which probably ain't that difficult. And what's this? Magnetic Flux. Artifact creatures you control gain flying until end of turn. Nice, nice. Equipped creature has unattached Loon and Bolo, tap target creature. It's basically this set's take on the whole white creature that taps things. Here's one. 2 mana, 1/1 for flying. Then it lets you... He's basically a shade, but you have to pay 1 life, which makes sense. It's kind of like a Putrid Leech, where you can trade life for extra damage or a bigger creature. Yeah, here we go. The equip guys. Another thing where, you know, they had creatures that actually interacted with new mechanics. Whenever Aureok Glaive Master is equipped, it gets +1/+1 and that's first strike. And it's a 1/1 for 1. So, you get some cheap ones like Bone Splitters to throw in there, and you can make a whole deck based around this kind of stuff. Psychic Overload. When it comes into play, tap Enchanted Permanent. Enchanted Permanent doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. Yeah, that's... Again, it's a thing where the uncommons are kind of weaker, but they're more complicated. And that's the way they used to do things. They used to have pretty powerful stuff at common. Things like good removal, like Doomblade and all that. But then the uncommons were kind of situationally powerful. But they were more complex. And that's the way I feel like it should be. You shouldn't have to... How to say this? Not all the good cards should be rarer cards. But anyways, we're running short on time again, and I don't want to do another third the third set of this, so here we got a nice little Arcbound Stinger. 2 mana, 1/1 flying modular. He's your basic guy, along with Arcbound Worker and then any kind of modular deck you'd make. Let's see what else. Oh, there. Carry Away. When it comes into play, unattach enchanted equipment. You control enchanted equipment. So, that's 2 mana, so... yeah. Normally, things like this seem like they'd be... more costly, that's the word I'm looking for, but, you know, this one seems kind of efficient, but situational again. Anyways, I'm out of time again, so this will be the last of it.